He was always there, always at her side, the keeper of her secrets. And when she died, he took her secrets into his home. So began a royal scandal that would end in the highest courts in the land.
I am Diana's rock, and I will always be her rock. And I'll show them. I'll show them.
Paul Burrell worked as a footman to the Queen for 11 years. But then he received a special request. He went to see the Queen.
I popped my head around the corner of the door and said, "Could I have a word? There's something which I really want to discuss with you, and I'd really appreciate 5 minutes of your time." And she said, "Well, Paul, what is it? What's the problem?" I said, I hopped around from one foot to the other and said, "I'm not quite sure how to approach this subject, but the Prince and Princess have asked me if I could become their butler at Highgrove." And she said, "Don't worry, Paul. It's all right. I know all about it. Charles has explained to me exactly the situation, and it's fine. You're not leaving me. You're just moving to one side." She said, "And then when Charles and Diana are king and queen, you'll be back at Buckingham Palace, looking after them."
Paul Burrell arrived to find that the marriage of the Prince and Princess of Wales was already coming apart at the seams. Was there a moment when you thought that things were not all right with the royal marriage?
I always knew that things were not what they seemed. But marriages have ups and downs. I didn't know the intensity of what the princess was trying to tell me at that moment in time. And when I was employed by her, I began to be trusted more and more, and she confided in me more and more. But it's a very sad situation to watch a couple grow apart. And it was heartbreaking for all of us to watch that happening at first hand.
It must have been difficult because there must have been occasions when you would be asked by one or the other of the parties to take sides, to take a side.
Yes, I was. On one famous occasion, the Prince of Wales was quite cross with me because I had relayed some information to the Princess quite accidentally.
About his whereabouts?
About his whereabouts and whom he was seeing. Quite accidentally. And he called me into his study and said that that I had betrayed him.
Did he use that word?
No, he didn't use that word. He used a different expression. And he said that he wished me not to discuss his whereabouts with anyone, which I respected, and I never did it again. But that's a sort of an illustration that put me in a very difficult position.
Was he angry?
He was very angry, and I think he did actually throw something at me at the time, but...
Reports it was a book.
That's true.
Did it hit you?
No, it did. I managed to duck it. But quite understandably, I don't blame the Prince of Wales at all. I fell foul of a golden rule to keep the master's secrets safe. And from then on, I did exactly that. I asked the princess not to ask me personal questions, to not put me in that position again. And she respected that too.
Diana believed that her husband's affair with Camilla Parker Bowles was continuing. It led to her becoming desperately unhappy and then unwell. As we know, she did develop a rather serious eating disorder. You were her confidant. That must have been very distressing for you to watch.
Yes, it was. But I knew the routine. I knew the way things happened, and I'd make preparations by preparing custard, rice pudding, or her favourite white chocolate. I had stocks of all the supplies which she might need, and I sort of aided and abetted, I suppose, in lots of ways. But the underlying factor was I was there to take care of her. and do whatever I had to do to make sure her life was comfortable, to make sure she had everything she needed. And that extended into every corner of her life.
So you tried to help her through the eating disorder?
Yes, yes, and she educated me, too, about it. I now know a great deal about it, I understand it, and why it happens, and I understand the process of what has to happen to get over that particular hurdle.
And in her case it happened because?
Because of the breakdown of her marriage.
What was Prince Charles's attitude to that illness?
I don't think that he particularly knew a great deal about it. And unfortunately, if you're not informed about something, you can't give an opinion. It was something which was alien to him. He didn't know about it, and he didn't understand it. I mean, some people have accused the princess of being mad. But she wasn't mad at all. She was just misunderstood.
As the marriage broke down, that must have made your position very difficult, kind of acting between the two parties.
It was. It was very difficult. My allegiances, of course, were split between the two, but my heart was with the princess.
Because you were close to her, you were the person in whom she confided.
Yes. And then when the split famously came, the prince said to the princess, "You can have anything you want. What do you want? Do you want the dining room table? It was given to us by the cabinet as a wedding present. Do you want the silver coffee pot, or the television, or whatever?" And she said, "No, I want Paul." And he said, "No, you can't have Paul. He came with me from Mama, and he's mine." And she said, "Well, no, you said I could have anything I wanted. I want Paul." So I went back to London with her.
There was actually a fight over you.
Well, I think I went along with the furniture. I went along with the video cabinet and everything else.
Diana moved to Kensington Palace to begin a new life without Prince Charles. With her went her faithful servant, Paul Burrell. They began to form an intense bond of loyalty and affection.
She trusted me with everything in her life, and she called me her rock, the captain of her ship, her third eye. All those things, all those compliments were poured on me because she trusted me with everything. And so, yes, I did become the person she trusted more than anyone else. And the field narrowed down from an army of 12 people down to 2 or 3.
And you don't agree with those who say that she was in the habit of using that description applied to a number of other people?
I never heard her refer to anyone else. I did hear her refer to people as, "You're a star. What a star you are." And her close personal friends, she would refer to as, "What would I do without you? I couldn't possibly function without you. You are so good to me." But not a rock. A rock is a specific term which I claim for myself.
You said you organized everything. Did you ever, as it has been alleged, sort of smuggle people in and out of the palace?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Because they were private occasions, strictly between the princess and her friends. Actually, it's nothing to do with me. I was just the third party that facilitated meetings and arranged everything which happened in her life. Isn't it unfortunate that someone else had to witness that and organize it? Normally, in normal life, we can do what we want, meet whoever we want, but not in an environment like that.
But the princess would say to you, "Paul, Mr. X or Miss X is coming to see me." Would you arrange for him or her to be secretly smuggled into the back entrance of Kensington Palace?
Absolutely, and it is possible.
And she could trust you to the extent of facilitating meetings with people with whom she may have had relationships?
Yes.
She could trust you to that extent?
Absolutely.
And you fulfilled that duty?
I did.
You did that?
Yes.
You brought them into the palace?
Yes.
Do you think she was ever in love?
Yes.
With whom?
That's a very difficult question to answer, Sir Trevor. And I don't think I'm the person to ask.
But you think she was in love? You think she had found...
The princess did find love in her life.
True love?
Yes, she did. She found a soulmate.
But her relations with her own family were deteriorating. Her brother, Earl Spencer, offered her a house, a retreat, on the family's Althorpe estate, but then decided to withdraw the offer.
All the plans were going ahead. She'd even taken her interior designer, Dudley Potblack, down to measure for curtains, to decide fabrics, to refurnish the garden cottage. And then out of the blue, a letter came to say that I've had second thoughts, and I don't think it would be a good idea if you came and lived on the estate. This was from Earl Spencer. She felt abandoned.
A letter?
A letter came, yes, telling her that he'd had second thoughts. So she did feel rejected and abandoned by her own.
What did she say to you about that?
She was so terribly upset. This was her only chance, her only opportunity of having some normal life, and it was snatched away from her by her own family.
She felt totally cut off from her own family.
Yes. There was an occasion when the princess's mother did ring the princess and was very unkind and used strange language. One language which one would not expect a mother to use to her daughter. I don't wish to repeat the words which were used, but it left the princess under no illusion that her mother would not forgive her for certain aspects of her life.
To put it as euphemistically as possible, she didn't approve of some of her friends.
That's right. That's right. She thought she was keeping the wrong company.
And this referred particularly to some of her male relationships.
Yes, it did.
What did you make of that? What did you think of the family for saying that?
I thought it was wrong. The princess chose who she wants to be with. It was her decision, no one else's.
And after that, they broke off relationships and never talked again for?
Well, the princess sobbed throughout the conversation, and in the end slammed down the receiver and said, "Paul, I'll never speak to my mother again." And she never did.
During the summer of 1997, Diana began a new relationship with Dodi Fayed. They holidayed together on a yacht in the Mediterranean. You were probably one of the few people who could clear this up so that there'd be no contradiction at all about it. Do you think that she would have got married to Dodi Fayed?
There were no plans for a marriage to Dodi Al-Fayed. I spoke to the princess the day before she died, and having known all her secrets, and knowing that sometimes I would say, "You can't hold your own water," she would say, "Tell me everything that was happening, discuss everything with me." And she discussed intimate details of her relationship with Dodi with me. I knew all aspects of it. Why would she leave that one so important fact out of that last conversation if it was the truth? I have no doubt that it wasn't the truth.
She was never going to marry Dodi Al-Fayed?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Diana, Princess of Wales, and Dodi Fayed prepared to leave the yacht to head for Paris. You spoke to the princess the night before she died.
Yes.
What did she say to you? Was she happy, looking forward to the future? What did she say to you?
She was. She was wanting to come home. She says, "Paul, I'm so looking forward to coming home." She says, it's all very well floating around on a boat in the middle of the Mediterranean, but it's searing hot on deck and freezing cold down below.
She said that to you?
Yes. I want to come home. I'm desperate to see the boys? Will you tell them that I'm going to be a day late because we have to go to Paris to sort out some business at the Ritz, and I'll be home a day late? Will you arrange everything? I said, yes, I would. And the last thing she said to me, her very last words to me were, Paul, promise me you'll be there. Promise me you'll be there for me.
A day later, the phone rang early in the morning at Kensington Palace. The news was devastating. Diana, Princess of Wales, was dead.
Everything in my life seemed to disappear down the tubes on that night. And we had to come to terms with it, privately and personally. My immediate response was that I'd have to get to Paris somehow. She would want me to take care of the situation. There's no dignity in death, and I felt that I had to be there. I didn't want this to become a peep show for the world. It had to be kept private, dignified, and I had to control it.
In a way, what you're saying really was that you saw a central role for yourself in doing this, almost as though you suspected that without you, you were worried about whether some of these things would be done with the decorum that you thought they should have.
I couldn't trust anyone else to do it. I know I could trust myself.
But that's an extraordinary thing to say, because of course she was member of a large and established family. However, it had been fractured by the breakup of the marriage, but she was still a player in this. But you felt that it was your duty.
I knew what she wanted. I would have known instinctively what she wanted.
It must have been a very strange and difficult time.
The strangest thing was going to Paris and seeing the princess. And all I want to say about it is the fact that when I first saw her, I thought she was asleep. The enormity of it didn't hit until much later.
You talk about sort of your life going down the tubes. You also saw it in a personal sense, in a career sense.
Everything. I'd lost my friend, my boss, my career, my home, my car, my life pension, everything in my life. But my boys' schools, the princess facilitated their positions at their schools. Everything seemed to collapse, implode. And it was very hard to come to terms with everything at once.
Do you think that trauma affected you mentally? I mean, did you?
Yes, I do. I do. No one offered me counselling. No one asked me if I was coping with the situation. I just got on with it.
Paul Burrell returned to Kensington Palace to find that the world he'd organised there was changing forever. Were items of the princess already being removed?
Yes, they were. On one occasion, several carloads of clothes, personal items, furniture were removed from Kensington Palace by her family.
But how did this happen?
Well, they had the right to take away whatever they wanted. They were executors of the will. There was nothing I could do to stop anyone taking anything. Well, certainly not members of the family. And I wouldn't stand in their way. But I was there to witness what was happening, and that's become part of course, the court case and what I experienced and what I saw, and that is the truth.
So you would see carloads of this stuff being taken away?
Yes. In fact, I helped. I was instructed to bring down the princess's suitcases filled with her own clothes and load them into the back of cars. I was told to do that, and I did it. It wasn't my place to say no.
But how did you feel about it? Because you had been so close to the princess.
I felt that everything that was contained within Kensington Palace belonged to William and Harry. And the items which the princess had entrusted me with during her lifetime, I felt belonged to William and Harry. They're never my property. Once how her estate was being closed, Mrs. Shankid took it upon herself to start shredding personal documents and letters. It then occurred to me that, for instance, if I was to hand over everything that I had, it could be erased. For instance, the letters, the damning letters from Earl Spencer, refusing the princess a house, which I know were in my possession. I kept them safe. That could be part of history lost, and there would be no proof. So I think it's important that I remembered this property wasn't mine, never was, and I was keeping it safe. I was only a custodian.
You say members of the Spencer family were shredding documents. I mean, what kind of things were they shredding?
Well, of course, I wasn't there the whole time, but I know that correspondence formed a large part of that. I know that correspondence was shredded because I removed the bag in which it was thrown. I don't know to what extent the letters which were shredded, I don't know the information they contained. I wasn't there the whole of the time, but this process took several weeks, so one can only imagine the volume of what was destroyed.
Burrell began to move Diana's private belongings into his own home. These are exclusive pictures filmed by him for his trial. His house was already filled with royal gifts, photographs, some of Charles's paintings, antiques, jewelry. Now he hid away boxes of Diana's most private belongings all around his house. You were spotted by a policeman removing Diana's property from Kensington Palace at 3:30 in the morning.
Yes.
Why?
Quite honestly, because I had to dispose of personal items of the princess's property. I'd been asked to. Her underwear, her swimwear, her gymwear, things that were very private. And I did it at night when I thought it was safe and no one would ask me what I was doing.
What, so at 3:30 in the morning?
Yes, 3:30 in the morning. That sounds odd, doesn't it? But I often used to visit the palace late at night because I wasn't sleeping. And I would visit the princess's rooms because I felt close to her there. Everything was as it was when she left it. Everything in its place. And very often I would sit in her dressing room and feel her presence.
I'm not a psychiatrist, but you were describing something pretty close to a breakdown of sorts.
Well, I didn't recognize it as that. I just recognized the fact that I'd lost someone very close to me, and I was trying to regain that connection.
Several months after Princess Diana's death, Paul Burrell was invited to visit the Queen in her private apartments. This is his account of that extraordinary meeting.
Nothing had changed. Time stands still. And I walked into the room as if I was walking in there as her footman, not as former butler to Princess of Wales. And Her Majesty stood there and smiled, with those familiar half-rimmed spectacles on the end of her nose, and greeted me warmly. And our conversation began. And we stood in the centre of her sitting room, surrounded by Canaletto paintings, for 3 hours.
You stood throughout this meeting?
I stood. Yes. Throughout the meeting I stood, as did the Queen.
For 3 hours?
Yes. Her Majesty's used to standing for a long time.
Isn't it an unprecedentedly long time for the monarch to be talking to the former butler of her former daughter-in-law?
Or her former footman.
Or her former footman?
Yes, but we were riveted to the spot. There's so much to say. I hadn't seen Her Majesty since I'd left her.
Did you tell the Queen precisely what you had stored away of Diana's possessions?
I didn't go into an inventory, no. She understood and knew how I felt and thought.
I knew she understood how you felt and thought, but did she ever get any appreciation of how much of the stuff you actually had?
She didn't ask me. I didn't tell her. I may sound rather presumptive and arrogant, but it wasn't meant that way. All I said was that I was keeping certain items safe. I had witnessed what I had witnessed. I did not wish the fact that history should be rewritten. I felt that it was a very important time, not only for the royal family, but for history.
So you told the Queen that you had witnessed what you had witnessed, that some documents were being shredded,
Yes.
or had been shredded.
I have no secrets from the Queen.
And you indicated your disapproval of that.
Yes,
And you used that as a justification for saying that you had taken some for safekeeping.
yes,
And it was your understanding that the Queen approved of this.
yes. Why should she disapprove?
And then she warned you. Take me through that.
She said, Paul, do be careful. There are powers at work in this country of which we have no knowledge. And she didn't have to explain that any further. I took it as a warning, or be careful, I'm concerned about you.
But a warning from the monarch to you, her former footman, is quite extraordinary. What did it all mean?
I wasn't given an explanation.
But didn't you seek one? I would have said, Your Majesty, please, tell me more. What do you mean?
Well,
am I in danger?
I thought it was presumptive of me to explore that further. I would not ask questions of the Queen. It would be very out of character and out of place.
What did she say about Diana?
The conversation, part of the conversation about the princess will always remain private, but the part I can tell you is the fact that Her Majesty was moved. And she said that she had written to Diana on many occasions. And I said, I know, Your Majesty. I saw the letters the princess showed me to.
But you told her all about Diana's life?
Yes, I did. I told her about my grief and how I was coping. She asked me how I was coping. How are you coping? How are Maria and the boys? This was a very gentle, kind consideration coming from the Queen. It was her gift to me.
Being so close to Diana, you must have been in a position to tell the Queen a number of things, which you say is secret, which she may not have known.
Yes.
And you did?
I could fill in the gaps. I certainly could fill in the gaps of all those speculations, newspaper gossip, things that aren't true, which are still happening. People do not know the truth unless they were there, unless they witnessed it personally, unless you actually heard it or saw it. You can't actually say, can you?
When you told her how unhappy Diana was, what did she say?
She said that she'd tried to reach out on so many occasions. I said, I know, Your Majesty, because I saw your letters. The princess showed them to me. I said, but the problem was, you speak in black and white, and the princess spoke in colour.
Did she understand what that meant?
Yes, she smiled. She knew exactly what I meant.
But you described the atmosphere as so relaxed that at one stage you wanted to hug her.
I wanted to reach out. And I knew that wasn't protocol, having known for so many years and been drilled inside me. Had it been the princess, it would have been very different. But it was the Queen, and I couldn't. I would have loved to wrap my arms around her and said, I understand fully the responsibility and her position and why everything happened the way it did. But I couldn't.
But there must have been a lot of secrets to take 3 hours.
A lot of talking, yes. I suppose time stood still. for a short time at Buckingham Palace. And at the end of it, she said, "Oh, Paul, I think I really should take the dogs for a walk," because the afternoon was gone. And at that moment, I left, and Her Majesty disappeared into the garden, deep in thought, trailed by 9 or 10 corgis.
A few weeks after his unique meeting with the Queen, Paul Burrell saw her again to receive a medal for his services to Princess Diana.
I can remember the Lord Chamberlain saying, "For services to Diana, Princess of Wales, to be decorated with the Royal Victoria Medal, Mr. Paul Burrell." And I don't really need an announcement because she knows exactly who I am. So I walked in front of her and bowed respectfully and then approached her. And she was handed the Victoria Medal and hooked it onto my lapel and said, "Paul, you don't know how happy I am to give you this." Then I said rather cheekily, "But I could always come back and look after you."
Paul Burrell's increasingly troubled relationship with the Spencer family fractured when he started work as a fundraiser for the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund.
They hadn't particularly been kind to me during my time there. I was referred to as the emotional cripple.
What did that mean?
Well, I was still grieving the loss of the princess, and perhaps I gave the appearance that I was rather down and dour. I'm sorry if that was the impression, but they were difficult times.
Is it true that a Spencer family aide told you, "Remember where you came from"?
Yes, it is true that I was only a servant. Actually, I turned that around because I've always said I am very proud to be a servant. Proud of my heritage, proud of my background. So what is that about?
What they meant, or what they might have meant, is that you were perhaps getting above your station, mixing with the glitterati of Hollywood.
Well, perhaps they thought that. But I can also mix with kings and queens. Is that above my station too?
Some months later, police began an investigation into the whereabouts of a mahogany box. The box had been opened at Kensington Palace by Burrell and Diana's sister, Lady Sarah McCorquodale. Now it had disappeared. Its contents were known as the Crown Jewels. So what were the Crown Jewels?
I think that was referred to as the Box of Secrets. That box was discovered in the Princess's sitting room at Kensington Palace. It was locked. Lady Sarah and I had to search for the key. I didn't know where the key was. And we looked around the apartment and we found it stuffed in the bottom of a tennis racket cover. So together, at the same time, we opened the box, and there were the secrets referred to in the court. The tape. Letters from Prince Philip.
This is a tape outlining a sexual assault.
Yes. And the letters. And a signet ring. And probably some other documentation referring to the divorce settlement or something. I'm not quite sure about that, but
a signet ring from James Hewitt.
Yes.
Did you ever hear the contents of the tape?
No, I never heard the contents.
Did you know what it was about?
I did know what it was about because the princess told me, and I knew its implication.
And what was its implication?
Well, it's a very serious implication of an alleged rape.
But by a member of the royal household against another member of the royal household?
Yes.
Why was the princess keeping this tape?
I think she kept it to keep safe the identity of the people, the perpetrator and the victim. She wanted to protect them.
But this was a serious allegation.
Yes, it was.
One that needed to be investigated, perhaps.
In hindsight, yes.
So why would she have kept it?
I think, in her own way, she would wish to sort out this problem herself.
Did she?
No. She didn't. It was an unresolved problem. She took care of it and decided that no further action should be taken.
So what happened to the contents of this box?
I have no idea. They're out there somewhere, but I don't know where they are. I don't have them. The last time I saw them was in the box at Kensington Palace.
In January last year, police carried out a dawn raid on Paul Burrell's house. They were after the crown jewels. During the search, the police asked if you had any items from Kensington Palace, and you said no. But that wasn't true, was it?
Well, it wasn't true, but when you're actually invaded by strangers at an early hour in the morning, it's fair to say that your mind isn't actually fully aware of what you're being asked. And when they asked me that, I was in a state of shock, having been arrested, and thinking to myself, well, do they mean, is there anything in here that I've stolen? Do they mean, is there something here that shouldn't be here illegally? And I was thinking, no, there isn't anything. Look around the rooms. This house is filled with items from 21 years royal service.
Why didn't you mention your agreement with the Queen and clear up the misunderstanding there and then?
Because honestly, I didn't think it was important at that time.
Paul Burrell was charged with theft, and as his world fell apart, he kept a video diary which we can show for the first time.
I suppose these antidepressants are working. I hope they will kick in by the time the trial comes around. It's not easy, living from one day to the next. It's been almost 2 years now. It will be by the time the trial finishes, and it's a long time to wait for something to happen, not just for me, but for Maria and the boys. I don't really think it's very fair, but then life isn't fair, is it? It's sad sometimes, but you just have to get on with it.
How bad did things get?
They got very bad. All our savings disappeared. I had to find some income for my family. I'm a proud man. It's hard to accept the fact that you can't pay your mortgage.
You talked about your very fragile emotional state. Were you ever suicidal?
Yes, I was. I thought I brought shame, not only on my own family, but on the princess too. And at my lowest point, I did make a decision. And I'm sure people will understand that when you get to the bottom and there's nowhere else to go, you do make very silly decisions and mistakes. And I will never forget, sat in a lay-by in my car with a bottle of water and a bottle of pills, thinking, I can escape from this. I can actually finish it now. I can't handle any more of this. The one thing that stopped me was the fact that I owe it to Maria and the boys to get through this, to come through and tell the truth, tell my story, put the record straight, and make sure that they don't rewrite history. And the fact is, it's the truth. And there are so many people out there who know it's the truth. They know it. What if I have to go to prison? Well, I'll just have to do it, won't I? I'll just have to get on with it. It won't be very pleasant. I can't see, in my wildest dreams, I just can't imagine that by protecting someone, by taking care of them, by devoting your life to someone, you could end up in prison. I just don't understand that at all. But if it does happen, because innocent people get sent to prison, and we all know that, I just have to grin and bear it, face it, but as long as my family understand who I am, know me, then it'll be all right.
On the night before his trial began, Paul Burrell and his family gathered together at his home.
This is going to be so emotional. The whole thing is going to be so emotional for everybody. I don't think anyone has thought about that yet. What an intrusion it is into a very special place. And we shouldn't be going there. It's, too many people have too much to say about me or the princess's life, and it's about time they stopped it breaking through and leave her at rest. And sadly enough, I'm going to be the one stood there, aren't I, perpetrating this trial. I'm going to be the one that's going to betray her. Well, I'm not, because I'll never do that. I'm going to hold my head high. I'm going to stride and say, I'm here. I am Diana's rock, and I'll always be her rock. And I'll show them. I'll show them.
The next day, Burrell set off to face down his accusers on the stand at the Old Bailey in London.
Give it to him.
I am not going to let people rewrite history. I'm not going to let it happen. No way. Princess stood and fought for so long and so hard against so many for that to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Paul Burrell's trial for theft began in the glare of the world's media. The chief prosecution witnesses were the Spencer family, Diana's two sisters, and her estranged mother, Frances Shand Kidd. Do you feel that you had been betrayed by the Spencers?
Yes, I do. I do. They said I was family. Mrs. Shand Kidd, on the eve of the princess's funeral, took off from around her neck her most valuable possession, a gold cross, and put it around mine and said, "This will protect you and help you through the ordeal." So I do feel as if I've been let down. This whole sad situation could have been avoided with one simple conversation.
After 3 weeks, the trial was dramatically suspended. Behind closed doors, the judge was told of Paul Burrell's conversation with the Queen. When did you hear that your nightmare was over and that the trial was about to collapse?
My legal team actually didn't know what was happening during those last few days. Lord Carlisle called me from the dock of the Old Bailey, beckoned me to him, and put out his hand and said, "Paul, it's over." And it felt to me at that moment that a floodgate had opened, and I collapsed on his shoulder and cried. Because suddenly I realized then that this nightmare was over, and that someone, the Queen, had saved me.
You said the Queen came through for you. That suggests that the palace did act to stop the trial.
The Queen's conscience intervened. She saw an injustice. She put it right.
Paul, how do you feel?
Burrell left the court freed of the burden of shame and suspicion, which had dogged him for 2 long years.
Paul, hold your head, mate.
You still wear the cufflinks with the D for Diana on them, which she gave you.
I do.
You really loved her, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And do you plan to continue fighting to preserve her memory?
Yes.
How will you do that?
In a way which I think is appropriate and fitting. In a way which others want me to. I could disappear tomorrow, in the middle of Africa, and help someone. It wouldn't matter. I have to do something now for me. Paul Burrell has to stand up and do something which he'll be proud of.
Paul Burrell now plans to return Diana's possessions to the two people he believes they truly belong to. What do you plan to do with the items now? Will you return those which were specifically intended for William and Harry? There were cards from their mothers, school books, pictures of their childhood. Will you return those?
To William and Harry.
The way you particularize that suggests that it's not going through any other route. It will go directly to them.
It will. They're old enough now to accept it. When this tragedy happened, they were children. They're not now. They're adults.
Do you feel at all slightly embarrassed that you're the one making these judgments about when they should have it?
No.
You're not uncomfortable with that at all?
No.
That is in line with your view of what their mother would have wanted?
Yes.
Do you want any of the items yourself? Which ones in particular would you like?
I only want the things that the princess gave to me. That's all. I know what she gave me. I will keep those. They're my treasures. They're not for sale. They're mine.
When you said that you would return the items to Prince William and Harry at a time of your choosing, you must be aware that Earl Spencer has said that he hoped that his sister's property would be returned to her ancestral home at Althorpe. Would you do that?
So they could be put on display? No. I'll return them to William and Harry. That's who they belong to.
They're not going to Althorpe?
No. I want to shake William firmly by the hand one day and say, I will never betray you or your mother.
Do you think they know that?
In their hearts they do.
Do you think they know how close you came to their mother?
Yes. I think they do.
If she were around today, would Diana have been proud of you and what you've done?
I hope that she's looking... I hope that she's looking down. And I hope she says, you are my rock.
You can see more of Paul Burrell's extraordinary video diary in Tonight with Trevor McDonald, tomorrow at 8. Well, next, there's a new addition to Coronation Street. Then at 8, Lulu makes a guest appearance in Heartbeat. And later at 9, Foyle's War uncovers a shady web of secrets and lies.